One of my absolute favorite podcasts is How Did This Get Made, a bad movie dissection podcast hosted by June Diane Raphael, Paul Scheer, and Jason Mantzoukas. If you're a fan of bad movies, I highly recommend checking it out. I bring this up because it was my inspiration for wanting to cover the weirdest and worst politicians in Washington, especially the weirdest VP nominee in United States history, Senator JD Vance. I was even more intrigued when I found out that he is the author of the infamous Hillbilly Elegy. The book itself is an autobiography that he wrote before becoming a senator that describes his time growing up in the northern Appalachian region of the United States. After its initial release, it became a bestseller and was even made into a movie directed by Ron Howard. However, the book is also widely considered to be an extremely offensive caricature of Appalachian life. And today, we'll be discussing his book in length. That's right, I read Hillbilly Elegy so you don't have to, because, well, why would you? And, spoiler alert, the book is not very good, unlike this episode, which will be objectively fantastic. And long, it's kinda long. That said, sit back and join us as we discuss the strange existence of America's possible next vice president. Tonight on I Do Not Trust This Person, Season 3, The Ballad of JD Vance, the Weird. Well, hello and welcome back to yet another season of I Do Not Trust This Person. Last time we left you, it was Ron DeSantis. The time before that, it was George Santos, who's now going to jail because he pled guilty, or at the very least going to have a few ankle monitors on his ankles, just like John Ralphio. But this season, we're going to cover somebody different. But before we get to there, what's up, Alanah, co-host extraordinaire? How are you doing?
I'm very excited to talk about this person.
Yeah. So one thing that has been consistent in America the Podcast reporting and in anything that we've done here is that Republicans are weird. Talking directly to you now, Tim Waltz. Tim to Tim. I came up with it first. We called Ron DeSantis weird for a long, long time. And only 4 episodes, really. But still. and you know what? So did the Almost Presidents. What's up, guys? They much longer before you. So it's just been a trend that they've been weird. And finally, the Democrats caught on. And the weirdest person to ever come out of politics has been JD Vance. And he is now going to possibly be the vice president. Probably not.
Truly unbelievable.
How weird he is. So that's what this season's about. The Ballad of JD Vance, the Weird. Before we get to that, Alanah, how many books have you read this year?
Oh, let me see here. Gonna pull up my handy Goodreads app.
Goodreads, yeah.
Not that we're sponsored by them, but
nope.
I'll put
Can't
in
stand them. No, I think they're great. No, I
don't even joke about
there's
that.
Goodreads, and then there's like another list one that I heard about too, but let's not go down that route.
17 books.
17 books. Wow.
17 books.
Wow.
I try to do 2 a month.
Yeah.
24,
that's good.
yeah, a year. And
We've done about 5 this year.
You know I love a long historical fiction.
Yeah.
So
which is probably kind of with a asterisk on the end of that. What this book I read recently is.
What book did you read recently?
Well, I didn't read it because I didn't have the time, because I just get tired and I'm dyslexic. But I did listen, unfortunately, to the audiobook of one Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir by none other than JD Vance that was made into a movie by Ron Howard, starring Glenn Close and Amy Adams. And then I don't know who played JD because it's about his childhood. So didn't bother to look at it. And who cares? Because it was just some poor, unfortunate kid who's going to be made fun of for playing JD Vance his whole life, I'm going to assume. But
now I care. Now I want to know. But you never say the most important part, which is that it was narrated by him.
Oh, it was narrated by JD Vance. I had to which, I am a voice actor, and, I even made the judgment call on him that he's not bad, but he's not good as a narrator. It's just a very monotone, boring voice, as much as he is a monotone, boring robot of a man. But we're going to talk about his early life in this episode here, and then the next one, who he became. After that, we're going to do the memification, and then finally his political future. You heard all of that in the trailer if you listened to it, which you can by subscribing to this show on any podcast app that you listen to, or on the America the Podcast Presents YouTube channel. So please do that. Leave a 5-star review. And now let's get going into the life of John Bowman, John Dean Bowman. I don't. What's his actual name? You've got his page pulled up. He changed his name a lot. So forgetting that
is not a surprise. So here we go.
Here we go. So James David.
James David.
Right. Which are biblical names?
Yeah. James is a disciple of Jesus, and David was the king of King of Kings. That's Jesus.
So James David Bowman, born Bowman, James David Bowman, born August 2nd, 1984. He is currently 40 years old, just turned 40 this year. He's a Leo, if I may say.
Does he track with that?
So I unfortunately am not a huge astrological science person, but I did very high level just look up, the traits of a Leo. And it does seem he does have all of the negative aspects,
which are
like when a Leo goes bad, because with every astrological sign, it's like when they're at their best, they're like this. And when they're at their worst, they're like this. And not surprisingly, JD Vance is exactly what a Leo is when they are at their worst.
What are those traits?
Aggressive.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll find that out in this episode.
We'll definitely find that out.
Yeah.
And really just that is like the word that
just aggressive. Well, yeah, it is. A Leo is a lion
because they can be very passionate. So when it's positive, they're very passionate and creative and intense in a good way.
Yeah.
And then all of that can go wrong.
And it did. I definitely think it did. Which is, his book, Hillbilly Elegy. I read this, so you don't have to.
Thank God.
Please don't listen to it or read it. It's not a well-written book. It seems like stream of consciousness, much like this podcast a little bit. But
okay, so let's start with James David Vance, born in Middletown, Ohio, which let us preface this by saying that neither Tim nor I are from Appalachia
or
Ohio, nor have we been there or know anyone from there. So we're going off of what he has shared with us of his life and what we have
a news show-ish.
what we have heard. But from my understanding, Middletown, Ohio is fringe Appalachia at best.
It is on the outskirts of Appalachia, yes. Ohio, from what I understand, and please correct us in any sort of comments that.
No, we don't want to hear any corrections.
No, or don't. No, we can. It's fine. People who think we're NPR, you are so sad.
Tell us what you learned.
So
his parents, it sounds like his parents divorced when he was very, very young.
They did, and there's a man, this guy. All right. So first, I want to say that he literally intros his book with, "My book is pointless, and I'm too young to have written this."
He wrote.
I don't know if that's verbatim, but
2016, or it was released in 2016.
It was released in 2016,
probably wrote it
and then a movie.
A few years prior. So
yeah,
if he hold on, I'm going to do math. If he's 40 now, this book was released in 2016, 8 years ago. So it was released when he was 32.
Yeah, so he was early 30s. Yeah, he talks about being in his early 30s in this.
So
He also then says basically that some of this might be bullshit because he basically says he spent over 30 minutes with his sister in a conversation about how his story differentiated from hers. So he's like, and granted, he had a very traumatic life. So, misremembering things isn't a surprise, but it's also, we got to take some of these stories with a grain of salt, especially because for the majority of this thing in what has been the main review and was the review of the fella who was actually from Appalachia, from West Virginia.
I read a fantastic
link
essay.
is in the description. All of our research is in the description.
An essay by a gentleman, a poet named Justin B. Wymer. It's called Time of Hillbilly Elegy on JD Vance's Appalachian Grift. Very, very beautifully written essay, which just takes a different perspective and not a very positive one of JD's book.
No, and because what JD does throughout the entire thing is, he paints the people, the good people of Appalachia, and even the hillbilly life as just a bunch of toothless, ignorant, like inbreds who rely on the government to survive and will carry out, quote, he uses this phrase a lot, hillbilly justice, which, I'm sure there is, especially in a tight-knit community of, hill people. But he talks about them as if they're just psycho murderers who are ready to just absolutely lynch anybody who crosses them or looks at them the wrong way. I mean, we'll get to it, but a story where him and his mom or his grandma and grandpa, mama and papa, basically destroyed his CVS and over Christmas gifts. It was insane. But so yes, he would visit his time in Appalachia is visiting Jackson Holler or Jackson, Kentucky, or that he refers to as the Holler, which is, a hillbilly community where a lot of his family is from. He spent summers with his mama there, who was the main influence in his life and like his biggest rock. But still, even from chapter 1, and nothing against the Appalachian community, but he paints them as like people who would stop at funeral processions because we're hill people and we respect our dead. Like, as to suggest that the rest of the country doesn't. Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a law you have to pull over when a funeral procession, or it's just common courtesy, I guess. But like, they're proud people, but he is trying to. But before we get even further into it, my biggest frustration with this is he is trying to just use these people's story that he kind of lived as painting himself as the everyman, and that he's from real America and the rest of us are all just elites from the every other corner of everything, which is what the general
sells, it does to people. So he was born, as we've heard, in really middle class town. His
mom, despite her drug issues and being in and out of just marriages, they lived in a pretty decent middle class home, from what he describes.
But then he visits, so it's really the time spent in Kentucky, visiting his grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
That has the influence on him.
Which, lots of influence. There was, like I said, how he paints them all as violent people. He says he has a relative who threatened to cut off his ear and feed it to his dog until he was saved by Mama. Like, JD had to run home because this guy was just a psychopath, basically. He had a relative beat a man almost to death. But that guy didn't press any charges because it was a hillbilly issue and they don't want to get the law involved and things like that, which, again, I get that kind of stuff. It's, no shame on, again, a tight-knit community, but that's not a norm. And if it is, that shouldn't be a norm, I would say. Like,
I think, I did not read the book. You were the one who got to listen to hours and hours of JD Vance speaking at you.
Yeah. And talk about the issues of Appalachia, which there are real issues there that he does address. Of course.
I not to say that, as I've already said, I don't know. I am not like intimately familiar with this part of the country. But one of the books I read this year was Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And she is from Appalachia. And this novel takes place in Appalachia. And it's a heartbreaking novel of the difficulties of truly living and being, born and raised in that part of the country where you are born. Your chances are very high of being born to a mother who is an addict and, living probably in a trailer park or some very impoverished area. And from a very young age, kind of being told by the community around you that there's not a whole lot of opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And so what is the alternative? You might as well just start taking drugs at a very early age and turning to alcohol and all of that. So
JD pretty much says that exact same thing too.
So it is an incredibly difficult place. And I can understand, I have more understanding of why, people in that area do feel forgotten.
And they have been. They truly have. The United States has forgotten that area.
And that they have turned their back. Where I struggle, obviously, and this is what the essay that I read by Justin B. Wymer talks about, is how can, all of that is true, right? But how can someone like JD Vance, who has the education, right, has, and we'll get to that, but because I'm getting ahead of myself, but I just feel like I want to say that I hate JD Vance, because how can someone who now has the perspective of, getting an education, seeing how the internal workings of politics is, experiencing a different type of life, going back home. How can someone like that say that it's their fault? And that is essentially, and I know that he doesn't say that in black and white in the book, but it is heavily implied.
It is definitely heavily implied. And he kind of does say that here and there about some people. He talks about welfare queens. He uses that phrase a lot. He's a lot of offensive words in there. He even says the F slur at some point at the end. You didn't have to put that in there, but he talks about how, all of these people are just poor as shit and they're mean about it because they're embarrassed. People got pissed when a Jackson native did a piece on ABC about Mountain Dew mouth, which is this is horrible. This is a real thing. And basically moms will, if they can't breastfeed because they have too much, either drugs in their system or just can't do it and they can't get access to formula, they'll put Mountain Dew in bottles sometimes. And people will just be drinking Mountain Dew from a very young age, or just Cokes and just sodas in general. And it causes their teeth to rot. And it's a horrible issue. And they got real pissed at this girl, saying it was what do you call it? It was just an offensive thing to be put out, but this girl was from Jackson. Yeah, it was not even a betrayal. They thought they didn't know that she was from Jackson initially. This girl's from where JD claims to be from. Yeah. And JD's mom even, I think she put Pepsi in his bottle, or his mama stopped her right before she did it. So he was lucky. I don't remember what she said. I have it written down that she did, but I don't think that's the case. But maybe she did it once, but even then, my God, Pepsi to a baby. My grandpa used that shit to strip the acid off of his car battery. He should have gotten a new car battery, but.
It is.
Oh my God.
You have to think why would someone do that? Right?
Yeah, pure desperation, and that it's
desperation and lack of information, right?
Lack of resources.
The only reason someone would do that is because they have a baby that they are desperate to feed.
Yeah.
They are either unable to produce milk, or they, for some reason, don't want to breastfeed, and then can't afford formula, and don't have anything else to give, and need to give this baby something that has calories in it. That level of desperation and lack of information, the undereducation to not be aware of what the consequences are of what you're doing, or even if you are aware, the desperation of needing to give a baby just food, I don't know. I really, really, really fundamentally just struggle with his, now knowing him and the positions that he stands for.
The switch, which we'll get to next episode, but
I don't even know if it's a switch, because it sounds like even 8-10 years ago when he was writing this book, he fundamentally believed that these people are lazy and it's, their fault that they're in these positions. And I guess he does at one point, right towards the end of the book, kind of acknowledge that
just to jump way literally ahead to the end, just so you can, have a bit of release here. He does finally say, well, my mom was also abused by Mama and Papa, who he paints as fucking saints throughout the entire thing. And very, not necessarily physically abused, but they would constantly yell and she would duck down and be very scared of their fighting. And that led to her, kind of losing it and getting into drugs and all the decisions that she made, and that a home of abuse was, what really did it. And he blames it on just a cycle of lots of things on a cycle of abuse and stuff like that. But he still paints, again, Mama and Papa as absolute saints throughout the whole thing, and his mom as an absolute drugged out monster who actually did try and murder him, according to his book at least, and then uses her later on at the Republican National Convention as a prop of this poor drug-addled woman who looked embarrassed and scared to be there.
And let us not forget that this is also the person who implied that couples should stay, women should stay with their husbands even through,
abusive relationships, because the kids are better off.
Again,
contradicts himself completely.
There are so many contradictions, and the fact that he himself experienced all
of this,
divorce marriage, like a lack of stability, right? And has himself become successul. Yeah. And yet he has said that people need a two-parent
home. And if they can't do it, the grandma and grandpa should help.
Well, hold on. Now we're getting, there's so many things.
There's too many things.
Hold on.
Okay.
Number one, he has said that people need a stable household to succeed.
Yes.
And yet he was able to succeed without one. Number two, he says that women should stay in a marriage, even if it's abusive, for the good of the children, even though he himself grew up in an abusive...
His mom was married like 8 times.
Household and saw the abuse from his grandparents to his mother, at least at the end of the book, acknowledges the effect that abuse had on his mother. Yeah. So clearly that did not impact him. No. Number three, he says that he recently said that if somebody is having trouble caring for their children or the cost of childcare, they should lean on grandparents, and grandparents should do more for those kids, even though he grew up in a household that was
literally his grandparents helping him the most. Yeah,
sure,
but only his grandparents.
His grandparents helped him, and that's great. And maybe that's why he thinks all grandparents can help. But if he thinks one step ahead, he would realize that his mother didn't have the ability to help his kids.
Yeah,
he couldn't turn to his children's grandmother for help because she was not in a position to help.
Yeah.
So how
if you don't have grandparents too, because some of them, fun fact, are dead. Like, right. So what do you do then?
Themselves. And guess what? Nowadays, things are so expensive that a lot of people who have retired are coming back into the workforce because they can't afford to retire.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just the lack of, you would think that having such an upbringing would make you think to yourself, why are these people experiencing this? How can we fix it? What do we need to change? Why are these people doing what they are doing? How are they so desperate? And yet he hasn't. None of this has affected his
skull
mindset.
Is too thick and his face is too round.
He's a fucking idiot because he's like his positions are just insane.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to more of those positions later on, but let's get through his book now. It's okay because he does infuriate a person this much.
It makes me very
I had to pause several times where I'm there's multiple pieces in here of me just in all caps writing. I hate you, JD Vance.
Where are we at?
We're at chapter 2, where I'm talking about his. Sorry, everyone. But
let's just run through. Yeah. We're still in his youth, right?
Let me break down.
Let's go through a couple of maybe stories.
Yeah. So first off, he likes to say that Mama and Papa or Papa are unique hillbilly names. That is just not true. So whatever. He really tries to own the hillbilly thing. At most, they're a hick thing. That or my grandparents were hillbillies and they were not. So whatever. He discusses the great migration of why, all of these cities, had a huge influx of all the people from the South and from Appalachia going in to seek better jobs during all of that. And it's just, to me, it really just rang do you not see the difference or the similarities between immigrants also trying to come in here and needing a better life? All these people were just immigrants from other states, which are kind of small countries. No, whatever. That's a personal opinion. But also, he says a hillbilly phrase is too big for your britches. Jesus Christ, dude, stop trying to own everything. It's not a hillbilly phrase. Oh my God. He just drove me. I am not from the country. I'm as much from the country as JD Vance, but I, like JD Vance, spent a lot of time in Kansas or in a hick area. And I heard all of these things growing up, and Kansas, pretty flat. So whatever. He then basically goes on to say, privacy was a theory and friends and neighbors would walk into your house. Moms taught their daughters how to raise their kids. Dads taught sons how to do their jobs. And brothers would tell brothers-in-laws how to treat their wives. That's that. And that's was their belief growing up. And the Christmas thing. So they did. So here's the first story of violence that he witnessed of this hillbilly justice, right? They go into a CVS and basically a clerk accuses JD of stealing a toy, I believe. And his grandparents freak the fuck out. And I believe just start destroying the store. I don't believe they actually assaulted the workers there, but that they would deign to ever accuse their grandson of stealing, which he wasn't. They just accused him of stealing because they all looked like, hillbillies basically. And so they destroyed the whole store, saying with his mom yelling at the dad, kick his fucking ass, or his grandma yelling at his grandpa, kick his fucking ass at the store clerk. And yeah, so that's just one more instance of them going absolutely psychotic on a dime. He talks about them losing it on like over spilled milk, basically, like just
which. Side note, he talks about in the book that he struggles with that as well.
He sure does.
With his wife, which is concerning.
Like she's had to tell him that not every small interaction of someone making fun of your dog or cutting you off is a blood feud. And he's like, well, I don't know about that.
Like that's not a person feud. With anger issues and unresolved.
He addresses it right at the end.
Unresolved problems.
Literally at the bare end of the book, he addresses it. It's just like, wow.
There's this crazy story that with like his grandpa was a complete drunk.
Yes.
Right? So
yes,
tell the story of his grandma, like what happened one day when
yes. So first, I should say that his grandma had 8 miscarriages. And him being the childless cat lady thing of it all, like, man, people struggle with that. And some people do want to have children.
Again, something that he should have a little bit more compassion for.
Jesus Christ, banana pancakes.
And he says, right, like, God. Because Usha did a, Usha is his wife.
Yeah.
Usha did an interview, I think on Fox News, trying to help with that whole fallout of, and she was saying, well, what he means and, what we want is that we should make it easier for everybody in this country to have a child and we should support that initiative, blah, blah, blah. And
okay, Serena Waterford.
It is. I mean, my God.
Handmaid's Tale.
We just watched the most recent, season
5 from 2022.
Yeah, 2022. But my God, some of the parallels, especially right now, of what is coming out of JD Vance's mouth is a little too scary.
And this happened before JD Vance.
But
basically.
He talks about these childless cat ladies, which, by the way, Kamala Harris right now on her merch store has an amazing childless cat lady mug.
Oh my God.
That you can get.
Well, I'll buy that for you after we get out of here.
She also came out because she's smart with a childless dog lady mug.
Thank you. Yeah.
Need to purchase
buy
that.
But
he comes out with this position, right, and claims to say that, what I meant to say was we should encourage people to have children. No, that's not what you meant to say when you're talking about childless cat ladies. Fuck you. And you grew up with someone who struggled, right, like painfully to get pregnant and have a child. And what if she was never able to have a child? Like, would she be less worth voting? Would she be less worth being a part of her community? Fuck you.
Yeah. Well,
and don't even get me started on the fact that they are allegedly pro people getting pregnant and yet don't support things like, childcare. After, affordable health care for all.
We could go on for the child care and abortion.
We talk about this all the time, right? People who claim that they are pro-life, but really they're just pro-birth.
They're pro-birth. Yeah, no, that's...
Because after the baby's born, it's a big fuck you to figure out how to deal with that.
Coney Barrett, and sorry to get sidetracked, but,
I'm getting angry.
Yeah, but JD Vance makes people angry. But really Justice Amy Coney Barrett released some sort of a statement saying that we need to get births up because we need more workers. Basically, we need bodies to keep capitalism going. So that's their general view.
Anyways, the story of Grandma.
Yeah. So his grandpa was a violent drunk. They ended up living separately, but never officially divorced ever. And they were happier for it. But, and he actually did quit drinking eventually. But before he did, he was so violent that she told him once that she'd kill him if he ever came home drunk again. He did so. And then she poured gas on him while he slept and dropped a match on his chest. He only survived or only had a few minor burns, but I guess the message was clear. Do not get drunk again. Hillbilly
crazy.
Justice, everybody. So
his dad was a Democrat.
Yes, his dad. He was a pro.
Sorry, his grandpa.
His grandpa. His dad.
Democrat.
We'll get to his dad in a bit. His dad definitely wasn't a Democrat, but his dad wasn't who he was painted out to be either. His grandpa was a Democrat, Party of the Working Man, which thank God they're trying to take that back now. But JD constantly, anytime the politics of his grandpa comes up, he refers to the Democrats as my grandpa's beloved Democrats. And I'm like, okay, bud, chill the fuck out. But it's just always super snarky with him. And he, but I don't get where the snarkiness has to come in when it is the actual policies of the Republican Party that keep Appalachia down. Who, like, it's like in Texas, we constantly, the Republicans are trying to say, we've got to fix Texas. The Democrats are making it worse. I'm like, well, you guys have been in charge for 22 years.
Right.
Like, and same with Ohio and Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky and Missouri. I could keep going on. All of Appalachia, West Virginia, minus Joe Manchin, who's basically a Republican. And those policies are the ones that make things worse. Like, it just is. And the disconnect in this of talking about how they need something to make these better, these people are forgotten, blah, blah, blah. When in the same breath, yes, the coal mine got shut down, but at the same time, there was a program called ARC that helped people who were displaced by their coal mining jobs going away to help them learn the new blue collar job of coding. And then Trump shut that down. So we had these things in place.
These states are controlled by Republicans, and yet they're trying to say, new gaslighting, right? Like, look over here.
The only left-leaning Republican they've had is John Kasich, and the man barely served.
Poor man. If I may, I want to read a little portion of the essay by the gentleman that I've been referring to, because I think it kind of summarizes part of what we're talking about here. And this is towards the end of his essay. He says, Appalachia is a distinct place. It's easy to spin false narratives about it because not many people know much about it outside the region. Addiction is a public health crisis here, as are mental health and heart disease. Queer people, women, and non-white people live here. Its relative lack of monetary and educational resources exists alongside its wealth of natural beauty. Education. He talks about education should not lead to simple totalizing answers, which is part of the criticism that he has in this essay of JD Vance, who ends up, getting an incredible education, and yet, as we've talked about, somehow not having any.
That's because of the people he associated with.
Any intelligent thoughts or critical thinking skills. So he talks about how education should not lead to simple totalizing answers as it does for the Republicans. Instead, education should lead to more questions. How can we help a place that at times doesn't know to ask for help, or understandably distrusts those in power? How can we tell the stories as writers that reckon with the beauty and devastation and kindness and all of the crisis, which is the nuance that JD Vance lacks in what he does.
Yeah.
He talks about Appalachia is mired in contradictions, but not the ones that Vance invents, this poverty of morals or addiction by choice and a culture in crisis. But we do know that we need to stop thinking that education is a tool of evil.
Yeah.
Education is not a tool of evil.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that has all of a sudden become this thing where we need to ban books and dismantle the Department of Education.
Because they want to control it. It is a literal Gilead situation. You take away the education. It's how fascism works, right? It's how the rise. You
so
get rid.
Frustrating.
The Nazis did the same thing where they got rid of books. The first books they burned. The first attack of the Nazis was on a gender studies building or something like that, I believe, and it was like for studying trans issues and stuff like that, and they burnt the books inside. And so that was the first strike of the Nazis. What does it sound familiar, everybody?
So he says, I'm almost done, but let me just read this one part. He says, we need to stop thinking that education is a tool of evil. We need to stop assuming that addiction, disability, and poverty are personal failures. We need to hold people, not their origins, accountable for their actions. We need to stop electing people who revile us. We need to stop confusing liberalism and social welfare programs with moral shortcomings. We need to stop voting against our own interests. We need to stop thinking hard work equates to success and that asking for help is a failure. Even the most hardworking Appalachian man might jerk at the sight of a snake, and JD Vance is one of them. Any representation is not good representation. So my final words to Appalachians, Vance is not of you. He will continue to profit off of you if given the chance.
Yeah, 100%. And he used this. This book fully it was a bestseller for a long time, and he used it to enrich himself and push himself further. Plus, you ask about how did he disconnect from this? This is the lawyer people that he hung out with, the right-wing justices that he worked for.
Well, eventually, but he does talk about how when he first went to university, I don't remember if it was when he went to Ohio State or Yale, that he surrounded himself with some liberals. He talks
it was
about
Yale,
them,
like all the loud lesbian or whatever, who's actually the person who we'll get to her in another episode of them, but that released the email exchange between both of them that, outed him for, this is the reason we know that he was a completely different person than he is now, and especially had different viewpoints on, trans issues and cops, that he hated cops, like whole thing.
Brings me to my personal view of him, which is that he has
no morals.
Zero moral compass, values.
He was bought and sold by
whatsoever.
Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and the CEO of Goldman Sachs right before Trump was about to pick Backgroumd as his VP, and they lobbied him one night, and that's why we have JD Vance now.
What else do we want to talk about from the book and his upbringing?
So I'm going to keep going further about, more about the abuse and getting to really kind of his mom, how he starts to paint her. So his dad gave him up for adoption when he was 6 years old, and it's not as bad as you'd think. I'll get to why in a second. But so his mom was... Well, I guess I should say why his dad gave him up initially. Basically, his family hated his dad so much that he didn't want to put JD through the fight that was going to get real, real ugly with his hillbilly family being the way they are. And he said, you know what? I'm just going to call it that he goes and lives with them. It would be more abuse on him if he were to go through this, and just didn't want JD to have to deal with it. JD does end up, finding all of this out, going to live with his dad for a bit, having a real nice time and finding the Lord, but to a negative extent. But his mom, though, while he was still having to live with her, and between her and Mama, his, the abuse either ranges from kind-hearted abuse to actual murder, or murder attempt. His mama punched him after he asked how it feels to be punched, because he needed to basically know how it felt, which, if you're going to live in that kind of community, I'm not necessarily against. At least it was Mama who took care of it. I don't know. I don't hit your kids. Jesus Christ, don't hit your kids. But then there was, his mom, who would beat the shit out of other people for making fun of him and defending him. His mom beat the shit out of an overweight woman for talking shit to JD during a football game that he was playing in, and left with a chunk of the woman's hair in her hand. So that was, part of her defending him. But then it gets a little worse because, one, the anxiety of all of these different events of his mom, attempted to kill herself in front of, or after she was confronted about her husband having an affair. She tried to crash her car. But his mama called bullshit on that, because if she really wanted to kill herself, I have plenty of guns, which was just like, Jesus Christ, you people are missing the point. But then his mom, this was the bad one, where his mom took him to get some football cards to apologize for being abusive, and then he pissed her off somehow, which then he did, he pissed her off. She sped up the car, and she said she was going to crash and kill them both. He jumped to the back seat because he thought wearing 2 seatbelts might save him, which pissed her off even more. She then stopped the car to, quote, beat the shit out of him, and he ran into a field. He found a lady swimming and asked her for help to call his mom or his mama. The mom found him, broke down the door to the woman's house, and dragged him out. The woman had already called 911, thank God, and they arrested his mom. Mama and Papa came and took him home. His papa was so upset when he cried that he cried, which just didn't ever happen. And when he was at his mom's trial, he said that she never threatened him because his lawyer basically said, if you say anything, your mom's going to go to jail for a long, long time. And so he ended up making a deal where he would live with his mom, but then go live at Mama's when he desired. And then he ended up going out and visiting his cousins in California, of all things, who took him to the gay district to teach him that not all gays are out trying to molest you, which I guess didn't take for JD. So, and he reflects on, another point in the book, I don't have this outlined, but he does talk about that. He thinks about California and his time out there as his cousins were happy. Everybody is happy. Maybe there was something to that. And, of them having a stable home life, which led to this, because Usha's same thing, had a stable home life. And that's what he takes the wrong message from everything, right? He's like, oh, no, stable home life, that's the only way to succeed. What about you, JD? Well, don't look at my past. Don't look at my past.
Yeah, exactly.
let's see, where are we now? Do you have any thoughts or anything about all the abuse I just said?
No. I mean, look, obviously he grew up very, I mean, that's that's awful, right? Like, obviously but I have no thoughts.
You have no thoughts on that because it's too baffling, right? Because especially because his mom, my mama said his head is a weird shape because his dad had pushed his mom around when they were young, when she was pregnant.
All
too.
of this is clearly awful.
Yeah,
and we live nowadays, thankfully, in a more accepting world with mental health and all of that. Sounds like he definitely needs some therapy for what he went through.
He tried and said it felt too weird and didn't like it, so he went to a library, got a bunch of psychology books, and self-diagnosed himself.
Well, it's not working because he has clearly anger issues with his wife that are still unresolved from his past, which again, it's like, he, at the end of the book, right, mentions that his mom was abused by her parents. And so he can understand how, she also had a difficult life. And yet that he still talks about in the book how she's, it's her fault that she's essentially insinuates that it's her fault that she's an addict and all of that. But yeah, I don't know. He
goes on, let me just interrupt. Yes. He does go on to basically contradict the stories that they did tell and talk about his dad and talk about that his dad became a Presbyterian or just a Protestant. I don't think it said Presbyterian. It doesn't matter. They're basically all the same. No, they're not. Come at me. I was studying to be a pastor for a while, and I don't like any of it. But he lived with his dad for a bit, and his dad, forbade him to listen to secular music. But not really. He just said he couldn't leave it in the house and just didn't say anything when he would listen to his Led Zeppelin records, or was it Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd? I don't remember, but he was fine with it. It seemed. He just, never brought up the fact whether or not it was satanic or not, because he didn't want his dad to, throw him away. But despite that, his church would, preach the satanic panic, where if you played Ozzy or whatever backwards, it tells you to sacrifice people in the name of Satan or some shit like that. Little Nicky shit. But the gay agenda, the war on Christmas, that was all the things that his church would talk about, which was what my church talked about too, more or less. But then he even went as far as to convince himself that he was gay once, which he's talked about, and followers of political news probably have already heard this, but he the only thing he knew about gay people was that gay men prefer men to women. He disliked women. His exact words. He disliked women, and his closest friend was a dude, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to hell because I'm gay." He told his mama that he was gay, and she told him that he was an idiot. Asked him if he wants to suck dicks, which shocked him, and he said no. And then she said, "You're not gay, and even if you were, God would still love you and would not care." So heard from the mouth, horse's mouth, the evil Democrat's mouth, mama. Sorry, yeah, I don't know how to spell. I spelled it as best I could on here. But yeah, and I understand his fear though. You know what I mean? Being in that kind of a church environment of thinking constantly.
They don't really make it very welcoming.
And they don't even really tell you what being gay is. I remember when I was in sixth grade, people would call each other gay in school, and I go, "What does that even mean?" And the kids would go, "You don't know what that means? He doesn't know what gay means." I don't know either. Yeah, none of them knew what it meant. It was just something. God, oh man, the Thousands were the worst, and they produced JD Vance as well as the rest of us listeners. So. Excuse me.
Well, no, we have listeners of all ages.
Oh, listeners of all, sure, yeah, not just millennials. And we have boomers, Xers, maybe some Gen Z. Are you out there, Gen Z? Let us know. So his grandpa ended up passing away. We also find out that he killed a dog with antifreeze that tried to that did attack Mama. So that was great. That not really. Animal abuse is awful, and his family did it regularly. It seems
he might as well be a Republican because animal abuse is par for the course.
Par for the course, Kristi Noem, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. kind of, but at least it's only dead animals with him. But Jesus. We almost did Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but then I just didn't view him as a concern. And he wasn't as weird. And basically, it was all just, it would be a show about him killing animals on every single episode.
He's become more weird like every day if something else comes out about him that's like, what is wrong with you?
We may still do him. The Almost Presidents already covered him in length. I suggest go listening to that because, Jesus, I don't know if they got to the animal stuff, but they might have. I don't remember. I feel like I would have remembered that. But so yeah, when Papa died, his mom OD'd and went to rehab, which, you know, was just so much for her that it kind of sent her over the edge. And JD ended up going to Narcotics Anonymous with her. And just how he describes it is just like lightly condescending. Like it felt like the whole time of just, and complaining too, just throughout the whole thing, he's constant. And hey, listen, man, I get it. You had that shitty life. I wouldn't want to go back to it either, but he's constantly talking about how he was trying to escape. And like, you know, at the end when has this realization about his mom and is paying for her to go live in a weekly pay hotel, you know, he's just like, God, I can't believe I'm fucking back here. I didn't want to be back here. And, but then he started to finally have empathy. Like, okay, you didn't have it before, man, which again, hard to do. Everybody's situation is their own situation, but I can't get past it. Like all of these stories he tells about her. Hard to get past
is like, I get it, right? When you are 8 years old and in the middle of it, obviously you don't have empathy. You don't understand it. You're not old enough. You can't
realize what's going on.
That.
Yeah.
But after you have grown, after you have, you know, learned everything that he's gone through, right? Like he's been to war. He has been to multiple years of college. He's got a law degree. Like he's been introduced to different people. Like you would think
he
that
brings that up too.
All of that life experience would broaden your horizons and make you reflect and think and realize some of the things in your life. But no, it hasn't.
No, it did to a point, just in not any of the good directions, just in the like, well, I learned how to eat healthier, so I don't eat as much refined sugar. Like, okay, neither do we, dumbass.
We eat a ton of refined sugar.
Yeah, we eat a ton of refined sugar. What are we talking about? I had 2 cookies last night, and I don't drink Cokes anymore, but he drinks Mountain Dew, which he thinks Democrats would think he's... what did he say about Mountain Dew? That he might be gay if he's drinking a Diet Mountain Dew? I don't know. He's weird. But he also, speaking of his mom ODing and everything, to go right back to that before, he ended up having to go live with his dad after he finally let something about his mom slip about her abuse. And she ended up, I don't think she went to jail, but she definitely she lost custody from him for a bit. And he went, like I said, he went and lived with his dad for a while. He was always afraid to ask whether Christianity and science were compatible. Because, like I told you, his dad didn't necessarily mind his music, but you weren't allowed to listen to secular music. It was just kind of a weird thing. He played Magic the Gathering, which is the only cool part of JD Vance for me. But he was afraid that he'd never told anybody or any of his parents or no, it was his dad or any of his brothers and sisters, friends, that because he was afraid it was like the church talked about being possessed by the devil because it's magic and there's witches and blah, blah, blah. Like I had a relative who left Harry Potter, the screening of Harry Potter, because my cousin got sick and viewed it as Satan coming out of the screen attacking her son. I'm like, or hear me out. He ate too much popcorn.
Yeah, right.
But so JD's mom ends up starting to use again. And this was like, he's kind of his final straw where she demanded his pee for a drug test after, while she was on probation or whatever. And then, his mama ended up getting an operation for like unneeded. This isn't necessarily relevant to his life, but they just struggled for that. And when that happened, he started noticing like the divide between the poor and the more, well off, because, he looked at people's shopping carts at the grocery store where some bought boxed food, who were the poor looking people, in his words, and the clean looking people, again, his words, had shopping carts full of fresh produce. He also noticed that poor folks buy formula and was told that for years that the more wealthy are more likely to breastfeed their children, which I just don't know if that's true, but if it is, okay, that's awful if that's true. But I can't.
I don't know.
I'm not going to take JD at his word on that, but that sounds like that could be the case. I mean, this country sucks. So,
I don't know if that is true.
Yeah.
The only reason I could think that might be true is, if in order to be able to produce milk, you do have to be well nourished, so and then also if you're working multiple jobs and you don't have obviously, to be able to breastfeed, you have to be physically with your child, unless you pump, which a lot of jobs don't give you time to do. So I think it's not as, I don't think it's as cut and dry.
I assumed not. Like
again, what this Justin Wymer talks about in his essay, which is that education should lead to more questions, more curiosity, instead of these like just totalizing statements that JD Vance makes, all of these very broad brushing what is it with a broad brush, painting with a broad brush, just about everything is what
which is what he does right here when he noticed that a lot of folks who were living off welfare were buying TVs while he was at the grocery store, which I laughed at for a second. I'm like, oh, I guess you can buy a TV at Walmart. But still, and having cell phones, so people are buying TVs and cell phones with their welfare checks. You know what? This is a free country and you can buy what the fuck ever you want with it. But, he goes on to say that he, with his hard-earned money, can barely afford his groceries, and that the government was just helping out his lazy neighbors. And that's the result of the so-called party of the working man, the Democrats. And I'm like, okay, but to your overarching statement that you just how he paints everything with a broad brush, it's a few people. Yeah. If you're going to pull the bullshit of, well, there's a few bad apples in the police force, they're not all bad, which is the case, kind of. It's a different issue. But the whole a few bad eggs, few bad apples, that is the case here, because there are a million other people on welfare and, on food stamps.
Who are desperately trying to improve their situation, work as hard as they can.
My family is on food stamps after the 2008 crash. I know a lot of people that had to do that shit. People needed help and they didn't all buy TVs. One asshole bought a TV and you're blaming the whole democratic system of welfare and Social Security on this,
we've talked about, right? Which this is a parallel, but it's like those articles.
What a fucking twat written radio.
It's like those articles that are like, oh, you're spending your money on avocado toast and lattes, and
Christ,
it's like,
give me a break. Millennials will never afford a house if they don't stop buying avocado toast.
Where you have these billionaire men in power with just money dripping out of everywhere, and yet you're giving me shit because I bought an avocado toast because, my God, forgive me for wanting one small indulgence when I sit at a desk and stare at a computer from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and stare out a window onto a fence 2 feet outside my window.
It's the old-timey thing of if you don't, you got to save all the ends of your soap so you can save money.
Yes, press the ends of your soap together
that makes one gigantic
save money. It's it's that kind of shit, right? And does that work? Sure.
Kind of,
incrementally,
Does it save you $2?
Sure,
that's it, maybe at most.
And maybe I don't need to buy an avocado toast or a whatever latte, but
buy it.
But
Jeff Bezos doesn't need to buy the biggest home in Los Angeles or a giga yacht that has a helicopter
Zuckerberg
pad.
doesn't need to buy an island in Hawaii or whatever the fuck he owns.
Fire moats around his bunker. Fucking Christ. Oh my
anyway,
God.
now we're getting off topic. We're almost done.
I don't trust capitalism.
Right?
That should be our next season. We are very close to being done with this episode.
I need a glass of wine soon. After this.
And it's not even 12. So, but it is Saturday. So you know what? Who cares? Free country, right? Your body, your choice. We're Democrats.
Yeah.
No, we're not. We're socialists. Whatever. So then he goes on to compare the hillbilly struggles to the blacks in the inner cities because he read a book about black folks moving to the north during the Great Migration. But while there are similarities, there is one very key difference, and what the different struggles that the white Appalachians and the black Southerners who moved up to Detroit had. Dude, the disconnect of this man is I know I keep saying this, but it's just so insane. The hillbillies had the exact same struggles as black Southerners who moved to the north. No, sir, they did not. You are a moron. Okay, but like Jesus,
Can't comment on that.
I can't.
Next.
It's too hard to talk about. Oh my God! But then he goes on to talk about, he goes to describe what Appalachians do is in this laundry list of hillbilly stereotypes. Like this is what we are, and then caps it on this one of the last chapters here of that a loving home is key to success with at least one adult. So even in his own book, he says if you have at least one adult, you're fine.
And nowadays,
you have to have 2-parent homes plus the grandparents. Good Lord. Then let's get into his abuse.
But what's interesting, one more thing here is he does in the book criticize, if I'm reading this note correctly from you, that he does criticize payday loans.
Oh,
in the book.
I'm sorry. That's a very big thing. He
but
does
nowadays,
very much.
He is all about
Sweet. And within the book, he contradicts himself. He talks about how hillbillies.
Walking contradiction.
He's a walking contradiction. He talks about how payday loans are, they predatory and, they take advantage of the poor, which they do. They're horrible.
Absolutely.
These companies need to be.
John Oliver did a fantastic episode on
Go
all
watch
of that.
And start calling your Congress people to abolish payday loan companies. But then it goes on to say that, payday loans help hillbilly people because he needed to help pay his bills and he went and got a payday loan because he was scared he wasn't going to
even in the book, he contradicts himself.
he talks about how when he was in college or it was definitely after the Marines or something along those lines, he had to, while he was working a part-time job at something, he had to get a payday loan. I'm like, and then talks about how great they can be. I'm like, but oh my God, did he not proofread his book? I don't know. But
so I think at this point we are at his
adult life, more or less.
We're approaching adult life. So we are at the year of 2003. He graduates from high school. He enlists in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
And he serves for 4 years in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And then using the GI Bill is able to attend Ohio State. Yeah. That's 2007.
Yeah. And then, keep going. Sorry.
And then he goes to Yale Law School after that.
Yeah. He attended Yale where he ended up, meeting Usha and his, all of his law friends that he mostly does not keep in contact with because they're too liberal for him, basically. But, jumping back to right before he went into the Marines, he was on a golf team in school. And at one point he showed up in dress shoes and some kid made fun of him the whole time because he, that's not what you're supposed to wear. And JD, quote, resisted the urge to bury my putter in his goddamn ear. And it's just always the hillbilly justice kind of stuff like that.
But I will say
stuff with him, like
there is one thing that he says about himself that I wholeheartedly agree with. And it is the fact that when he got accepted to Ohio State, he said that he didn't know if he would do well because he was a good student and he didn't have grit.
Oh,
and you know what, sir? You're right about that. You don't have an ounce of grit.
You don't have an ounce of grit.
You are a wet blanket. You are the most wishy-washy, pathetic, weak person and there are a million of you in the world, white, weak men. But my God, actually, no, there's more than a million of you because there's billions. 8 billion people in the world. So my God, there's a lot of weak white men in the world. But yeah, you know what? You're right. You don't have grit.
Yeah. When, he would say that he earned it in the Marines, who he says did not try and sell him on anything when he showed up. I will 100% call, no shade to the Marine Corps, but those recruiters are the biggest salesmen you will ever meet. I had friends that had to meet quotas to try and recruit people. I had them calling me all the time until I told them I had asthma, so they'd stop telling, which I don't, but to make them start calling me. But that was just they didn't try and sell you something bullshit, sir. They absolutely did.
I have just as a side note, because I know you mentioned at the very beginning name changes, so I just thought I would run through real quick. So he was actually born James Donald Bowman.
Oh, okay.
But Donald was his father's name.
Yes.
And his mother
did not want that. Yeah.
Hated that. So his mother changed his name to James David Hamill. Hamill was the last name of her third husband. Mm-hmm. So James David Hamill.
Who adopted JD later on and was pretty chill with him, but they split up because he was also abusive. They were all abusive together.
Abusive.
Yeah.
So he kept JD and then so Hamill, and then he kept the name Hamill for a while. And then shortly before graduating from Yale in 2013, he changed his name to Vance.
Yes, him and Usha, as they got married, they changed their names to collect both at the same time to Vance, which is what he says. I don't know if it says that's what he says in his book. But yeah, that was like, it was to honor, his grandparents, which I get it. You know what I mean?
Now, anything else from the book that you want to touch on?
Yeah, just the fact that he had to, like, I'm just going to run a few things. One, he does kind of try and he doesn't really try and say that he served in battle or anything like that, but he ushered journalists around Iraq more or less. He was the media liaison and ended up becoming a media liaison for a different military base, I believe. I don't have it highlighted here, but he also had to pay his mama's bills with his $400 a month that he got from the Marines, or her bills are $400 a month. He only got $1,000 a month.
So I guess grandparents don't have the funds to help raise kids.
Well, they weren't raising any kids anymore, but at that point. But yes, it was, she needed
Let me have my point.
You can have your point. But she did need help because her health took a turn for the worst.
Oh, because people have health issues that require money to take care of in this country. Fascinating.
Yeah. He also accidentally let reporters take a picture of a classified aircraft, which I thought was hilarious.
That is
dumb. And his grandma ended up passing away. It was super sad. And, he had a breakdown and almost crashed a car off of a cliff right after that. But I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So he became a lawyer because he didn't want to work with blood. He ended up trying to work for a senator who I think is the person who changed his mind on payday loans, because he pushed for payday loans, but he didn't like that initially, but I guess he changed his mind. And talked about how all of the people in Appalachia viewed Obama as suspicious for some reason were his words. I'm like, I wonder why all those white people were suspicious of Obama. But they said that, like, because of him, it was because he talked like an educated person and went to an Ivy League school. His clean accent is foreign to them. His credentials were frightening. He was born in Chicago, which is scary to hillbillies. Obama spoke with confidence. He wore suits, and being well-spoken made them basically feel insecure. According to JD.
Evil of education.
Yeah, this is all according to JD. Yeah. Whether all Appalachians feel this way is
obviously
not the truth.
Whatever.
This is his dumb perspective. But yeah. And he also goes on to...
I'm at the passive-aggressive whatever portion of the show.
It's hard not to be in this. But he also then claimed that Fox always told the truth about where Obama came from and his religion.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm going to just gloss over that and not fact-check that in any singular way. Oh, wait, I will. They constantly tried to say he was from Kenya and he's a Muslim. So, but he basically goes on to say that his community struggles with believing conspiracy theories, which he, kind of keeps, or doesn't necessarily keep perpetuating, but he's creating this conspiracy theory that all hillbillies are idiots that are not, are just uneducated and can't do anything, and that are all leeches on the government, which again, not the case, which is so crazy. Like, and I think this is where, once he finally gets into college, where his elitism starts to grow, where his professor, this had to stick with him, said that people in state schools don't do well, and then JD ends up acing the course or something, and his professor recanted what he said. But I guarantee you that had to stick.
Stand out to me that I think is funny is that when he first went to Yale, I think maybe it was at Ohio State, that one of his professors told him that he was a terrible writer. That's
the guy I'm referring to.
Which you do mention that the Hillbilly Elegy is written.
It's not a good book. It's not really a well-written book. That truly is the case. So that he goes on to describe how you get out of the working class to the business class in the workforce, your lifestyle changes and your old life becomes unfathomable. He went to England. He started eating healthier. He goes to the orchestra, and he wouldn't change a thing because he basically he ends up saying, why am I the only one who got to go to Yale? Why not others? Why is my area this way? Well, buddy, the Republicans
why don't you reflect on
those questions. Like it's like he doesn't know the answers to the basic questions that like you're a Yale educated lawyer, you son of a
right. Like it's not
you're
that
senator, which has no
just
prestige
sit and
anymore.
Think for a second.
God, like the second step of thought, like I always talk about that with you, and I've talked about in other shows, where just take one, like think about your question and then go one step further. Like that's all you have to do, and
keep questioning.
Yeah, like
keep thinking.
I'll never forget seeing like a meme. It was a church signs. It said, "Why do my tax dollars have to pay for these heroin needles?" And it was just like
Jesus
basically saying, "Why has my government and all of these policies made it to where we need to do this, like that we need to have a needle exchange? Like ask yourselves, why do we need to do it? Like well, what's going on that this is even being addressed? Like good grief." So yeah, then talks about how his wife could potentially be a character in an Ayn Rand novel. Usha, she's nice but direct, and even told directly with almost a deadpan face that her friend had a small head, or the smallest head that she's ever seen. Like, okay. God, when the server asked him if, here you go. This is the one I've been waiting to share with you. Side note, Alanah is a wine expert. What's your official title? A certified wine expert is your specialist. So he goes to an expensive dinner with the interview firm. Basically, when you are in Yale Law, all of these law firms will start reaching out to you.
Like in the movie The Firm.
Like in the movie The Firm. That's a great movie.
Called with
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. Like they all wine and dine him to get him to come to the different law firms.
And it's literally what happens. If you've seen The Firm, that's what's happening to JD right now. He's going to all these nice dinners. So he goes to the interview dinner. The server asked him if he wanted wine. He said, "I'll take the white," thinking that that would be the end of the matter, until she asked him if he wanted Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. He thought she was screwing with him until he used, quote, used his powers of deduction to figure out those were two different types of wine. He ordered the Chardonnay because it was easier to pronounce. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be an elitist asshole, but
you are being an elitist asshole.
It's not that hard to pronounce. She said Sauvignon Blanc.
No, I mean, if you've never heard it before, it's a completely foreign word.
He's been in Yale for years.
Well,
how?
Yes, that
Come
is.
on.
He's been at Yale for
how?
years.
If
like
you are friends with Oosh, you're literally dating. Like, oh my god, whatever.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Okay, so then he goes on. He said the tablecloth was nicer than his bed sheets, and he tried to touch it without seeming weird, which is funny. And hey, I get that because our bed sheets are.
No, this part
is genuine. It's just funny, like hearing him squirm.
But think about it. If you haven't been around or seen
sure.
I mean, like you grew up in a very Midwestern household.
Cheese to me was Kraft Singles, baby.
Yeah, Kraft Singles and Hamburger Helper and all of that
I would
stuff.
refuse to eat that shit.
So think about when you first moved to Austin and you were like, oh my God,
Gouda cheese.
What is Gouda? What is Gruyere? What is all of this other stuff?
Yeah, I know. And
don't make me defend JD Vance, Tim.
I know, but this next part is still kind of funny. He was asked if he wanted sparkling water or still, and he thought it was so pretentious, but ordered it anyways because the sparkling had fewer contaminants. He spit it out because it was gross. He didn't realize sparkling meant carbonated.
That's funny.
And then was baffled by the amount of cutlery, which, dude, I'm with you. There's too many forks.
It's a lot. Work your way outside in.
Basically, Did
you not watch Titanic? Outside in.
Which is what Usha tells him. He ends up calling Usha, which is kind of adorable, and the only one I'll give him.
Oh, but, Lord. Now we're defending JD
I know.
Vance.
I don't want to. This is the only time we get to defend him because the fish out of water scenario. But, he called Usha and she basically, oh God, she told him how the forks work and had to remind him to chew with his mouth closed. So there's that. But, he ended up working for wanting to work for a high-powered judge. And his own professor ended up saying, I don't think you're doing this for the right reason, and called him out. And he's like, yeah, I'm not. And then he ended up going with Usha to go clerk for somebody else.
So he, just to quickly run down, after he graduated from Yale, he worked briefly for John Cornyn.
Oh, yes, he did work for John Cornyn. He doesn't mention him by name in the book, I don't think.
And then he spent a year as a law clerk for Judge David Bunning, who is the district court of the Eastern District of Kentucky. Then he worked at a law firm and began a brief career as a corporate lawyer, but he only practiced law for slightly under 2 years before he became a venture capitalist.
Oh,
so
really?
He
Wow.
was, very briefly.
Yeah, he's, by the way, he's not a lawyer. Well, he keeps saying he's a lawyer. He's a VC. He's like,
now,
now he's not anything because he's having to, I think he doesn't have to divest unless they win. But no, he's
a
like,
very, very, very rich man.
He's very, very, very wealthy. Like he started, hanging out with all those kinds of people. And, he, like I said at the beginning,
works at Peter Thiel's firm. Gross.
Yeah. Oh, holy shit. What? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
again, he didn't mention any of this stuff in the book, which might have happened after the book.
Yeah, this is right after
that's
the book.
Fine. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think he had been doing any of this VC stuff yet until afterwards. But like, I said at the beginning, Elon, Tucker Carlson, and the head of Goldman Sachs all lobbied for him to be VP.
Changed him, honestly. Like, who knows? Because
he started hanging out with these people.
He became a venture capitalist right around the time, maybe just before, around the time this book was published. So around 2015, 2016, he became a venture capitalist.
Which, and like there was a news story as of recent, I think America the Podcast has a video on it, that one of his startups, the conditions were so bad that people were every day regularly leaving on gurneys because of the heat, I believe. It's in Kentucky too. I don't know what the business is, but that's just one of his many little startups that he has. And, all of the investment, all the weird friends he's made are all, pro. They keep trying to say they're pro-worker, and they're, oh my God.
He was the board of directors. He served on the board of directors for the startup App Harvest. This was 2017 to 2021.
So right after this book came out. Yeah.
Which carried out indoor vertical farming in Kentucky.
Oh, that's awesome. That is cool.
He said that it was an incredible investment opportunity, great business. They ended up going bankrupt in 2023, owing over $340 million.
This is the business that I'm referring to. Oh, is this the? Oh, sorry.
That's why I'm saying it.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I just thought you were mentioning off his businesses. I was like, wait, this is
no. That's why I'm saying it. So CNN, citing interviews with former workers, reported that the company, quote, provided a grim job experience for many of the working class Kentuckians Vance vowed to help, due to employees being, quote, forced to work in grueling conditions inside the company's greenhouse. While App Harvest eventually began contracting migrant workers from Mexico and Guatemala instead of Americans. Wow, immigrants. Oh my God.
Yeah, JD and his friends are not
I hate him so much.
Yeah.
Are we
almost like immigrants? Yes, we're almost done. Don't worry. We do like immigrants.
No, I'm just saying, like, he is so against immigrants and they want to kick all the immigrants out. And yet, guess what? You needed to hire them for your company. So what the fuck?
Let's get into his final bit here, which we can actually get through.
And then we will round it out with just his last few years of work.
Usha called him out for not being able to deal with conflict in their relationship. And he tried to break up with them multiple times. He would scream and yell like his parents and then feel bad after. He started to act like his mom is what he said. After a bad interview, Usha tried to console him, and then he exploded and started screaming at her, walked out for a while, and ended up finding her in front of Ford's Theater. She basically said that, you can't do this. It's never okay to run away, and he needs to learn to talk to her somehow. And then it was baffled at the fact that, her family was so nice and got along. He asked about an estranged family member, and her dad responded with saying, sad, with being sad versus saying a crazy rant about him is like, that like he just prays for his brother or whoever this relative was versus, JD's family who would go on an hour tirade of how this person sucks and they're a piece of shit, yada, yada, yada. And he basically learns how bad abuse is in the country. When he was told to, or asked by his wife to go to a counselor, he thought it was too weird. So went and diagnosed himself with basically, the fact that he was abused with ACEs, which are, that include physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, violence, household dysfunction, and witnessing violence in the home or community. So he is like, all of this basically messed up my brain, and which it does. Abuse does hurt a child's brain. Witnessing abuse hurts a child's brain. And like, that's, it's a double-edged sword with him, right? As we're coming to the end here where, both I want to believe, and I do believe that, just because you come from a home of abuse doesn't mean you're going to turn out to be a monster. But my God, you do need therapy. You can't just go to a library and diagnose yourself because it's clearly still not working for him. I mean, even recent news story we'll talk about in a second, but like of him being basically an asshole. Like, and to this day, he said he still struggles with it. But that's basically it. Like as it basically boils down to it at the very, very end, the conclusion of the book. He says he has this recurring nightmare about being abused by his mom and his sister Lindsay, who we didn't bring up. It was a big part of his life, helped care for him a little bit, but she doesn't really come up a whole lot in the book. She did kind of help him write it though, and at least helped get his story straight. But that they're abandoning him, and that he ended up having his own dream where his dog did something, and he was screaming and trying to kill the dog, and woke up like feeling bad, and this dog was just sitting there looking at him, wagging his tail, and he's like, ugh, I don't want to be this anymore. But that it's a process, getting out of the cycle of abuse, getting out of the cycle of anger. It is a process. I hope to God he really does come out of it someday. I really hope he isn't like this anymore, because again, this book was written a while ago and maybe he has come around. But again, as recent stories I've heard of him calling his just seeing how he reacted to, he was telling a story in an interview where he was doing something and his kid was trying to tell him about Pokemon or something, or Pikachu, and he just basically just I don't care about goddamn Pikachu right now, go fucking somewhere else. Like just basically chastises his kid, like, and yells at him about talking to him about Pokemon. I mean, his kid's like 6 years old. He's like, Dad, look what Pikachu can do. Look at Pikachu. And, he will yell at his dog and things like that. Like there are, and personally, just to be real, I've had my own anger issues before, not because of abuse in my home, but just, bullying in schools. And that's things I had to, get over. I had to go to therapy. I had to do meditation. I have to take Lexapro, or whatever my generic one is called. Like and I'm better for it. And he can be better for it. And like this book to me was just a telltale sign of not just the kind of people that exist and, whether or not that will be in power eventually. Like I'm reading this from the perspective of this man is about to be in power. If I had read Hillbilly Elegy back in the day, like everybody else did, I would have taken it as like, man, this guy went through a lot. I don't necessarily believe in some of his beliefs, but like, Jesus Christ.
And here's the thing, the New York Times included this book on the list of books to read if you want to understand how the country ended up electing Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right. And it goes back to that, people being forgotten about and underserved and all of that. But
I would say it's a very small portion of the book that does deal with those kinds of issues. The bulk of the book was talking about how his family carried out hillbilly justice and his mom's abuse, and just listing off cliches. 2 or 3 different chapters just ended with him listing off hillbilly cliches. Yeah. Like it's just, it was really disheartening, like listening to it, and frustrating listening to it because of the amount of contradictions, the way he talks about these folks who are good, hardworking people. Like the people of Appalachia are incredible. And despite being forgotten about by the country at large. Yeah. And he uses them as this prop that I can't now help but think that he used it to try and launch not only his career into the VC, but his political career as well. Absolutely. Which, people do that, but this is just like, dude, but again, off the backs of people who...
It makes you not a great person.
It makes you not a great person.
So he... to, get into the kind of tail end of his recent career, absolutely what you just said is true, because this book came out in 2016 and he literally December 2016 announced that he was moving to Ohio.
Oh, so he could you have to live there for like 6 months to be a
he
rep or
moved
something.
to Ohio and started basically a PAC, or, whatever, 501c4. Thanks, Wikipedia. That's the boring term. started the process, venture capitalist. He was still a venture capitalist, raised some money. And then eventually, Peter Thiel actually donated $10 million to fund his candidacy
in March
2021. And he got a bunch of other money, and eventually he was elected
senator. Yep.
Into a Senate position. A senator from Ohio, sworn in January 2023, and obviously has only been a senator about a year and a half, and now is
about to be the vice president of the United States, maybe.
Candidate.
So we'll get to who he is now, like all of the changes of the, not even, it's, reflecting back on this whole episode, there wasn't much of a change, but there was. He left a lot of parts about himself out of this book, which we can get into next time. The email exchange between he and his quote raging lesbian. Is that what I forget what the terrible term he used, but we didn't even get to, them and his whole group. But who he is now, and like the pieces of his soul that he sold to do this, because fun fact, the man who is about to be, or may hope to God, I keep saying that. Well, you never know. Like it's this, as Kamala keeps saying, this election is not over. He could actually be the vice president. I'm not sold that she'll win.
But stop saying it like it's a
he might thing. Okay, fine. He might not be the vice president. He might be, but the person who is now the vice presidential candidate for the GOP used to be very, very, very anti-Trump, calling him the next Hitler. But we'll get to that next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. You're welcome, or I'm sorry that this went this long. But, it was a man's early life, and a man that we really needed to get into here, because we really, you need to understand that this human man, again, will be one heartbeat from the presidency if they win. So thanks for listening. Leave a 5-star review if you feel led by the good Lord above, or below, depending on your religion. We don't care, but and also follow the show.
Go do something to de-stress.
Oh my God, go listen to. Comedy Bang Bang is great. America the Podcast is funny as shit, and I'm on it. I'm not on Comedy Bang Bang. Go for a walk. Go be in silence. Don't listen to anything about JD Vance for at least 2 weeks when you have to come back and listen to our show. Thanks again. We love you all, and stay safe. And register to vote at vote.org. Should have said that at the beginning. I will say it next time. Goodbye.
Listening to I Do Not Trust This Person, Season 3, The Ballad of JD Vance the Weird. The show is hosted and produced by Alanah and Tim Philippi. For a full list of news sources and music used in this episode, please refer to the show notes. This episode was mixed and edited by Tim Philippi at Shway Media Studios in Austin, Texas. The show's executive producer is Alanah Philippi. I Do Not Trust This Person was created by Tim Philippi and is a production of Shway Media and America the Podcast Presents. For more information, please visit shwaymedia.com or americathepodcast.com. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.
This has been a production of Shway Media, all rights reserved. For more information, please visit shwaymedia.com.
Connection is a healthy and essential aspect of our daily lives. From a warm hug after a hard day to kind words just when we need them, these gentle moments give us an understanding of life's true meaning. But when the ability to connect is interrupted by the hustle of daily life and to-do lists pile up next to the worry of who needs school supplies, sometimes making decisions about our health and the well-being of our loved ones can take a back seat. When it comes to those we care for, vaccines are one of the greatest public health success stories, and along with other measures, are one way to help prevent certain diseases. At Merck, we envision communities where families, healthcare providers, local organizations, and advocates work together. Health equity happens when every person, regardless of age and ethnicity, in every community, has fair access to healthcare, including the vaccines they need. For more information, please visit yvaccines.com.